I am Mallory Whitman, a 31-years-old woman. I run a children's speech therapy clinic just outside Denver. Last year, my world shattered when my sister stole the money I'd raised for my son's life-saving surgery. What happened next changed everything. The last time I felt truly hopeful was the night of the fundraiser. It had rained that morning, just enough to wet the pavement and leave behind that earthy scent that always made me feel like the world had been rinsed clean. Jake and I had arrived at the town hall early. He wore a clip-on tie with tiny superhero symbols on it and clutched his Batman blanket like it was armor. "You look like the mayor," I told him, kneeling to straighten his collar. He grinned up at me, eyes wide and too bright for someone who had spent the last 6 months drifting in and out of doctors' offices. "Do mayors get to eat cupcakes before dinner?" I laughed. "Tonight, absolutely." The community had shown up in full force. Banners stretched across the front of the hall, "Hope for Jake" in glittery letters. Inside, folding chairs lined the walls and tables overflowed with baked goods, raffle baskets, and auction items donated by local businesses. A high school band tuned up in the corner, playing something cheerful and slightly off-key. I remember pausing at the entrance, hand on Jake's small shoulder and just breathing, not in panic, not in grief. Just breathing. This was our moment. It had taken months to organize. I'd written emails until my fingers cramped, made calls from the hospital waiting room, set up donation pages and printed flyers during midnight coffee bursts. Jake's condition, a rare neurodegenerative disorder, wasn't just progressive, it was merciless. The surgery we needed wasn't fully covered by insurance. The hospital demanded an upfront cost, $200,000. We'd already lost time. Every day without surgery meant further decline, his right hand twitching unpredictably, his speech slurring when he got tired. I'd sold my car, emptied every savings account I had, and refinanced the apartment. And then I asked for help. People came. Neighbors, friends, even strangers. But no one stepped up more loudly or more publicly than my sister. Lindsay. She arrived at the fundraiser in a red blazer, perfectly tailored, with her hair swept up in that effortless, controlled bun she'd worn since college. She smiled for every photo, clapped loudest after every band number, moved from table to table with charm and assurance like she owned the room. And for a moment, just a sliver of a second, I let myself believe she meant it. That she really had changed. She'd offered to manage the donations, setting up a separate account through her accounting firm. "You focus on Jake," she'd said 2 weeks prior, sliding a folder across my kitchen table. "I'll handle the money, you don't need one more thing on your plate." I hesitated. Our history wasn't exactly spotless. Lindsay had a pattern of taking, borrowing, forgetting, rewriting stories, but this wasn't a dress loan or a missed rent share in our 20s. This was Jake. Still, I agreed. Because sometimes hope wears the same face as denial. As the evening wore on, people filled donation jars, bid high on auction baskets, and stuffed envelopes with checks. Jake sat beside me near the makeshift stage, legs dangling off the chair, watching every moment like it was the best night of his life. Lindsay took the mic near the end. "Tonight," she said, "we're not just raising money, we're raising hope." Applause, whistles, even a few tears. She thanked everyone, hugged Jake, and when we hit our goal, the full $200,000, she held up the tally board like we'd just won a championship game. The crowd erupted. Jake beamed. And I cried. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time in months, I believed my son was going to be okay. Lindsay showed me the donation app on her iPad later that night. It displayed the total, the donor names, and a secure account transfer in progress message with a green checkmark. "I'll handle all the routing to the hospital," she said, sipping her overpriced latte like this was just another Tuesday. "I've got contacts there who can make sure it goes straight to billing." I hugged her. "I mean it, Lynn," I said, "you saved his life." She smiled softly, and for once I thought I saw something vulnerable behind her polished facade. "I didn't save him," she said, "you did." I went home that night exhausted and full of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Gratitude. Jake fell asleep with frosting on his fingers and a smile on his face. I stayed up filling out surgery paperwork, humming the melody the band had played earlier. Everything was falling into place. Until it was. A week passed. I reached out to the hospital to confirm the payment had arrived. They hadn't received anything. I texted Lindsay. She didn't respond. I called. Straight to voicemail. Another day, then two, I emailed her firm's general contact. Nothing. By day 5, the panic in my chest wasn't subtle anymore, it was screaming. I drove to her office building downtown. It was locked. The receptionist next door told me Lindsay's company had relocated with no notice, no forwarding address, no explanation. I stood on the sidewalk in the cold, staring at the empty suite through the glass door, clutching a folder of paperwork with shaking hands. I called again. No answer. Then I checked the donation page. Deactivated. Gone. Every update, every donor comment, every dollar vanished from the page like it had never existed. That night, I filed a police report. They were polite, professional, they wrote everything down. But their tone shifted when I explained I had authorized Lindsay to manage the funds. She's your sister, right? The officer asked, almost casually. I nodded. He leaned back, so this is more of a family matter. A family matter. Jake's tremors were getting worse, his sleep disrupted. The doctors warned we were nearing the edge, a point where even surgery might not undo the damage. And I couldn't get a single call back. Then, after nearly 10 days of silence, Lindsay texted. Just one line. Don't look for me, it's not what you think. Then she blocked me. I stared at the message so long the screen went dark. I sank to the floor of my stairwell, phone clutched in both hands, knees pulled to my chest. And I cried like I hadn't cried since Jake was first diagnosed. My sister, had vanished with the money raised to save my son's life. Not just vanished. Erased herself. And now I had no funds. No trust. No time. But that night in that stairwell, something inside me flipped. A switch I didn't know I had. If she wanted to disappear, then I would become the kind of woman people couldn't ignore. The kind of mother no one could shut down. Because if Lindsay thought she'd just walk away with everything, she hadn't met this version of me yet. The day the lawyer showed up, I knew something bigger was happening behind the scenes. It had been 2 weeks since Lindsay disappeared, 2 weeks since the fundraiser became a faded photograph on my fridge, 2 weeks since I went from mother in crisis to woman in war. I'd tried everything, the police, the bank, the hospital billing department, even the hosting platform that had taken down the fundraiser page. Each step led nowhere, and with every "I'm sorry, ma'am" I heard, something inside me hardened. I didn't sleep anymore. I stayed up searching names, trying to trace digital breadcrumbs Lindsay might have left behind. I even messaged old classmates she hadn't spoken to in years, asking if they'd heard from her. I got pity, but not answers. Jake was starting to notice. "Are we still going to the hospital?" he asked one night while brushing his teeth. I hesitated. "Soon, baby, real soon." I hated lying to him, hated the way hope clung to his voice like it hadn't been ripped apart yet. And then the lawyer came. He didn't call first, just knocked firm 3 times and waited. I opened the door to find a tall man in his late 40s, sharp black suit, narrow briefcase, a practiced expression of concern painted across his face like he'd applied it in the mirror. "Ms. Whitman," he asked. "Yes." "I represent Lindsay Whitman, may I come in?" I didn't move. He continued, "I have some legal documents to deliver, you'll want to read them carefully." He didn't wait for an answer, just held out the envelope and turned to leave. Inside was a cease and desist letter. Typed perfect, cold. My eyes scanned the lines. Client alleges sustained reputational harm due to unsubstantiated claims. If defamatory communications continue, legal action may follow. Suit for damages, including emotional distress and career impact, is under review. I dropped the envelope. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from fury. She wasn't hiding. She was preparing. Preparing to sue me. Me, the sister she betrayed, the mother of the boy whose fundraiser she'd gutted. She wasn't afraid, she was planning. And worst of all, she'd hired someone good, the kind of lawyer who doesn't blink when defending someone like her. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the wall. The rage burned so hot it felt clean. For a few hours, I did nothing. Then I started digging. Not emotionally. Strategically. Because if Lindsay wanted a war of documents and statements, then I'd show her who she underestimated. I remembered a name from years ago, Sam Kitteridge, Lindsay's former colleague, a forensic accountant. They had dated during her early firm days and broke up under strange circumstances. I recalled how bitter it had been, how he moved out of state almost overnight. I found him online. Not easily, his social accounts were locked down, but I tracked a work listing through a public CPA database. He lived in Fort Collins now. I sent a short message. "You knew Lindsay, I need help. She stole $200K raised for my son's surgery. I think you know what she's capable of." I didn't expect a response. But the next morning, one came. "I'll see you tomorrow, noon, don't bring anyone, and don't use her name again in writing." It wasn't friendly. But it was something. I told my friend Harper to watch Jake. I drove 2 hours with nothing but a flash drive, a manila envelope full of fundraiser paperwork, and a rage I was learning to sharpen. Sam lived in a one-story ranch house that looked like it belonged to a man who'd stopped trying to impress anyone. Books stacked under tables, a mailbox taped shut, a dog I never saw but heard barking in the back. He opened the door like he expected trouble. And maybe he did. But when I handed him the documents, something shifted. He scanned them silently, nodding to himself, lips tightening as he read the supposed catering invoices, the bank summaries, the routing trails. Then he muttered, "Jesus Christ, she used the same method, same damn structure." I leaned forward, "You've seen this before." He nodded, "She didn't steal from you, Mallory. She engineered you. This is classic white-collar stuff. Delayed transfers, fake vendors, small offshore tucks that look like expense reroutes. I warned people once. No one listened." He tapped a printed invoice labeled Colorado Harvest Events LLC. "There's no such company," he said, "but look at the routing number. Cayman National Bank, untraceable unless you know where to start." He showed me how she'd moved the money through 3 shells. 3. "She's good," he said, "but not invisible." Hope cracked through my chest like a sunbeam. "You can prove it." He looked up with time and silence. I blinked, silence. "You can't go public, not yet. She'll frame it as slander. She's already tried. You need leverage." Leverage for what? For truth, the kind the internet can't ignore. I stayed another hour, learning more in 60 minutes than I had in 2 weeks. How digital footprints linger. How even fake vendors leave shadows. How when someone builds a house of lies, they always forget to lock one window. When I left, Sam handed me a folder. "In here," he said, "is enough to raise questions, not enough to win." I opened it in my car. Invoices, account summaries, an offshore link tied to a burner phone, one listed under a name Lindsay once used to rent a car in Maui. The cracks were showing. And in those cracks I saw my path. Not through courtrooms, but through exposure. Not for revenge, but for Jake. I drove back to Denver with a mind like wildfire. She tried to erase me. Erase my son. Erase the fundraiser that gave us hope. But she forgot something. I'm his mother. And I don't burn quietly. You don't realize how much someone's image is a weapon until it's pointed at you. Lindsay didn't just disappear after stealing the fundraiser money. She reappeared in full color, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on carefully curated panels about women in finance. As if nothing happened. She posted a quote one day. "Integrity is doing the right thing, even when no one is watching." I stared at it for a full 5 minutes. The likes rolled in, comments from peers, former clients, strangers. "Such an inspiration, Lindsay. You always know how to say it just right. Proud to know you." I wanted to throw my phone across the room. She wasn't hiding, she was performing. And the world was still applauding. So I stopped waiting for justice. And I started undressing the lie. Sam had given me tools, paper trails, offshore breadcrumbs, vendor receipts that didn't exist, but information was only power if people believed it, and no one believed a whisper. I needed to amplify it. That night, I created a new Instagram account under a pseudonym. At the Whitman Truth. No pictures, no names, just words and screenshots. The first post was subtle. Ever paid $11,200 for catering to a venue that didn't exist? Some people count on you never checking the receipt. I attached a redacted invoice Sam had verified. One Lindsay submitted post-fundraiser, supposedly for a venue coordination and food package. The company had no website, no address, just a bank routing number offshore. Then I added, financial abuse fraud is family to #truth doesn't blink. It got 30 likes. Then 100. Then people started commenting. At first they asked vague questions. Wait, who's this about? This sounds familiar. Is this about that woman from Denver? But by the second post, a screenshot of a tax discrepancy on a vendor file tied to Lindsay's firm, the tone shifted. More people recognized her. And they weren't kind. A former client messaged the account. She handled my parents' estate, swore everything was clean. I just rechecked the paperwork. There's a $9,000 withdrawal I never noticed. I replied, get a second opinion, quietly. Within days, others came forward. One woman had loaned Lindsay money during COVID, never got it back. A small business owner said she'd paid Lindsay to help streamline her tax filings, then received an audit notice 4 months later. They weren't huge scandals, but they were patterns. A mosaic of small betrayals hidden in paper cuts. I didn't post everything, that would have been reckless. Sam warned me to avoid slander, to stay in the lane of questions, not accusations. So I crafted every post like a riddle. If the catering hall didn't exist but the invoice did, where did the money go? When a sister manages a fundraiser and the money vanishes, what would you call that? People started guessing. And the guesses turned into whispers. And the whispers turned into calls. Then someone, I don't know who, sent the account to a small investigative blog that focused on financial corruption in nonprofit spaces. A reporter named Kate reached out through DM. She was cautious. Said she wanted to help but needed more than Instagram riddles. So I gave her everything. Anonymously. I sent her the fundraiser documents, Sam's reports, screenshots, a timeline. She went dark for a week. Then one morning the blog published a piece titled, The Sister, the Scam and the Silence, How $200K Vanished Before a Child's Surgery. It didn't use names, but the details were clear enough to shake the room. Lindsay posted a long-winded statement the next day. In these times, we must all remember that online bullying and misinformation are tools of the jealous and the unwell. I will not be silenced by malice. But she didn't deny it. That was the tell. If it were truly false, she'd threaten lawsuits. Instead, she flailed. And more people saw the cracks. Donations started to flow again, this time directly into a verified medical account I'd created through a crowdfunding platform that did rigorous identity verification. No middlemen, no managers, just receipts. A woman I didn't know donated $5,000. Her note read, My sister did the same thing. I couldn't stop her, but I can help you stop yours. Every dollar that came in felt like armor being fastened onto my skin. But I wasn't driven by revenge anymore. It was something deeper. Something maternal. She had used my son. She stood in front of a crowd and told them their money would save him, and then she stole it to plug her debts to fund her illusion of competence. Lindsay hadn't just broken trust. She weaponized it. So I stopped feeling guilty for tearing her down. Because she didn't build that persona. I did. Every time I let her borrow money and didn't ask for it back. Every time I covered for her lies at family dinners. Every time I told myself she just had a hard time growing up while I cleaned up her messes. I was complicit in the myth. But not anymore. The next post on read. People always say, but she was your sister. As if that makes betrayal softer. It doesn't. It makes it surgical. That one went viral. And when I finally checked the new donation total the following morning, we had enough. Jake's surgery was back on the calendar. My hands were shaking as I called the hospital. The scheduler paused after I gave her my name. I remember you, she said softly. We all did. Welcome back, Ms. Whitman. I hung up and cried into my hands, alone in my kitchen. But this time they were tears of power. I'd done it. I'd broken the illusion. And now she couldn't hide behind it anymore. The night Lindsay came to my door, I thought it was a dream. Not the kind that feels good, the kind where your stomach drops and your chest tightens, and you can't remember if you're awake or not. It had been nearly 2 months since the fundraiser, 2 months since she vanished, 2 months since I'd become a different woman, harder, sharper, less forgiving. Jake was asleep. I'd just finished cleaning the kitchen and was halfway through folding laundry when the knock came. 3 soft taps. I froze. No one knocked at that hour, not in our building. I walked to the door slowly, heart in my throat. And there she was. Lindsay. Trench coat, no makeup, hair limp and damp from the rain, she looked smaller, like the mask had slipped and what was left behind hadn't expected to be seen. Can we talk? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't speak. I didn't trust myself too. She shifted on her feet. Please, Mal. That name, no one had called me Mal in weeks, not since the world split open and I stopped being a sister and became a soldier. I stepped aside just enough for her to walk in. She did slowly, cautiously, like she wasn't sure if the floor would hold her. She didn't sit on the couch, she hovered, arms wrapped around herself like she knew she didn't belong there anymore. I waited. And then she said it. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I laughed. Not out of humor, it just slipped out, sharp and bitter. You mean you didn't mean to get caught? She flinched. I was going to replace it, all of it. I had a deal lined up, a merger, some new clients. I thought I could move the money, patch the hole, and no one would ever. I cut her off. No, you thought you could just use your nephew's surgery fund like a personal slush account and then what? Give it back after he died. She opened her mouth, closed it. I was desperate. I stared at her, so was I, so was he. I didn't think it would spiral, she whispered. It started with a delay, then another, and then the article came out and the account went viral and I couldn't control the narrative anymore. I panicked. I stepped closer. You panicked after you stole, not before. Don't you dare twist this into a mistake. I know what I did, her voice cracked, and I'm not asking you to forgive me. I came here to tell you I'm turning myself in. I blinked. What? I spoke to a lawyer, a real one, not the one who sent you that cease and desist. I told him everything. He says if I cooperate, I might get a reduced sentence. And what? You want me to pat you on the back for finally facing consequences? She looked at the floor. No, I didn't want you to find out on the news. I owed you that. I felt dizzy, angry, sad. But mostly tired. You owe me more than that, I said. You owe Jake everything. You let him believe he was safe. You stood on that stage with him. You smiled and took pictures while already planning to betray us. She nodded, slowly. I know. And now you want me to what? Shut down the Instagram, undo the truth. No, she said, just don't destroy me more than the system already will. My throat tightened. I thought about all the nights I cried on the floor, all the rejections from the hospital, all the nights Jake asked when the surgery would happen, all the lies I told to protect his hope. You did that yourself, I said. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small envelope. I've been sending money, she said, small amounts from inside. It's not much, but it's all I can do. I didn't take it. She placed it on the counter and backed away like she was scared I might hit her. I know you don't want to see me again and I'll stay away, but I just wanted you to hear it from me. She turned to leave. And then she stopped. I meant what I said that night at the fundraiser when I told you you saved him. My voice came out hoarse. Don't. She hesitated again. then walked out the door. And just like that, she was gone again. But something lingered. Not forgiveness. Not peace. Just the echo of everything we used to be. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stood there, staring at the envelope on the counter. Later, I tucked it away in the same shoebox where I kept her letters, not because I wanted them, but because Jake might someday. The next morning, I made the hospital call. We had everything we needed for the surgery. The room fell quiet after I hung up. And for the first time in months, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like closure. Imperfect, unfinished, but enough to breathe again. Lindsay didn't get a hug, she didn't get redemption. But she got a consequence. And I got my son's surgery. That was all I needed. That and the promise I made to myself that day. I would never let someone like her have that power over us again. Not as a sister. Not as a woman. Not as a mother. The morning of Jake's surgery, I woke up before the alarm. It was still dark out, just a faint gray light bleeding through the curtains. I lay there in silence, listening to the steady rhythm of Jake's breathing beside me. He'd insisted on sleeping in my bed the night before, said he didn't want to wake up alone in a weird place. I understood that more than I could say. I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, remembering how soft it had been when he was a baby, how small his fingers looked wrapped around mine in the NICU, and now here we were. Months ago, I didn't know if we'd get to this point. Now we were hours away. "Hey, Mommy," he mumbled without opening his eyes. "Is it today?" "It is. Will you be there when I wake up?" "Every second." He reached out and clutched my hand. "Okay then." We arrived at the hospital just after 6:30 a.m. The sky was clearing, sun rising behind the glass walls of the medical tower like a quiet promise. The pre-op room was cold, too white, the kind of sterile that feels like it was designed to erase emotion. But Jake handled it better than I did. He smiled at the nurse, gave a thumbs up to the anesthesiologist, and told the surgeon he wanted extra superpowers when they were done. The nurse laughed. "I think we can arrange that." I held it together, barely. I kissed his forehead before they wheeled him away. His little hand let go of mine too easily, too bravely. And then the doors closed. I sat in the waiting room, surrounded by people in similar chairs, all pretending not to panic. I didn't check my phone, didn't scroll, didn't cry. I just sat, staring at the floor, breathing. 7 hours passed. 7. When the surgeon finally came out, his face told me everything. "It went well," he said. Those words, those 3 words unraveled something deep inside me. I didn't cry in front of him. I waited until I was in the bathroom stall, hand over my mouth, heart pounding like I'd just run through fire. The recovery was slow. But Jake, he was a warrior. Each day brought something new, a steadier hand, a clearer sentence, a bigger smile. The tremors faded, the stiffness softened, he laughed louder, dreamed bigger. And I realized something I hadn't admitted before. I had changed too. I wasn't the same woman who stood behind a bake sale table, hoping someone would drop a 20. I wasn't the same sister who made excuses for betrayal. I wasn't even the same mother. I was harder now, not colder, just forged. Like steel through fire. After Jake's 3rd week of recovery, I submitted my resignation at the clinic. I loved my work, but it wasn't enough anymore. Not after everything we'd been through. I needed to build something that mattered not just for us, but for others like us. I started the Bravery Room 3 months later. It began as a support circle in a borrowed church basement. Just 5 women. All of us had been betrayed by someone we trusted, a parent, a spouse, a sibling. We shared stories. We cried. We rebuilt. Word spread, the group grew. I hired a trauma counselor, then a legal advisor, then a financial literacy coach. We found a small building on the east side of town and painted the walls yellow. We put a sign on the front that read, "You're allowed to speak, you're allowed to survive, you're allowed to start again." We held workshops on emotional abuse, family theft, financial trauma. We helped women leave bad situations, reclaim stolen assets, find their voice. And Jake, he became our mascot. He'd hand out cookies at meetings, show the kids how to use the beanbag chairs. Sometimes he'd wear a little superhero cape just to remind everyone what strength really looked like. I remember one night, a young woman in her 20s stood up and said, "My sister stole from me too. I thought it meant I was weak that I let it happen. But seeing what you built makes me think maybe it wasn't the end of me, just the start." I didn't respond. I just reached for her hand and held it. Because there was nothing to say. We were all versions of the same story. And we were still here. Still building. Still brave. I started getting letters, messages, emails. Some from strangers. Some from women I'd known in another life, moms from Jake's school, former clients, a friend I hadn't spoken to since college. They all said the same thing. "Your story gave me permission to tell mine." One woman drove 6 hours just to hand me a check for $2,000. "Put this toward someone else's fight," she said. "Help the next mother stand up." I went home that night, sat on my balcony and stared up at the stars. Not searching. Just breathing again. Jake curled up beside me, wrapped in his Batman blanket, already drifting off. And I thought, this is what kind of mother I became. The kind who doesn't look away. The kind who builds bridges out of betrayal. The kind who teaches her son that survival is not just escaping the fire, it's lighting a path through it for someone else. Lindsay was a part of our story. But she would never be the end of it. Not anymore. The first letter came on a Thursday, a plain white envelope, no return address. But I recognized the handwriting instantly. Sharp, controlled, like someone who wanted the world to know they never made mistakes. I almost didn't open it. I stood in my kitchen, Jake's school papers scattered across the table, bills in a stack to my left, and that envelope right in the middle, like it had landed from another timeline. I could have thrown it away, should have maybe. But I didn't. Inside was one page, no greeting, no "Dear Mallory," just sentences spaced too carefully like she'd measured them with a ruler. I keep wondering which moment lost you. Was it the fundraiser? The iPad screen with the fake bank confirmation? The knock with the lawyer's envelope? I replay them all. You were always the light, Mal. And I was the crack in the glass. I don't expect forgiveness. But if you ever think of me, I hope it's not as the monster. Just the coward. I read it twice, then I folded it and sat down. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stared at the edge of my kitchen table and tried to remember when my sister's handwriting last showed up in my life without leaving something broken behind. A week later, another envelope arrived. This time there was more. A photocopy of her sentencing documents, her prison ID number, and scribbled along the margins lists. Handwritten vendor names, transfer dates, fake company aliases, offshore routing numbers. She wrote notes in pencil between the lines. Colorado Harvest Events was fake, you already know that. Check out PayCap Ventures. I used it to mask a $17 case shift from another client. She didn't apologize. She documented. She exposed herself. I took it to Sam. He scanned the pages without looking up, then he pointed to a name circled in the lower corner, C. Dillon Holdings. "That's her shell," he said. "I found that one 5 years ago, never had proof." "Now we did." "She's turning on herself," I said. He nodded. "Looks like she's decided to cooperate. Maybe it's guilt, maybe it's strategy, could be both." Should I reply? He looked at me for a long time. Not yet. So I didn't. But the letters kept coming. One every few weeks, always the same envelope, always the same rhythm. Fragments of confession. Not melodramatic, not woe is me, just clinical, as if she were finally putting the puzzle together backwards. In one letter, she wrote, "I've been assigned to laundry duty. I make 14 cents an hour. I asked if I could have it routed to Jake. They said no, but I keep saving anyway. I know it won't undo anything." But someday, if he opens a college fund and there's something in there, let him believe it was you. Please. I didn't show the letters to Jake. Not yet. He was thriving now, talking more, writing jokes on the back of his math homework, building Lego towers like his fingers had never trembled at all. He'd ask about her sometimes, not in anger, not even with curiosity. Just soft, passing questions. Do you think Aunt Lindsay would have liked this movie? Or was she always so good at baking? I never lied. She made bad choices, I'd say, but that doesn't mean everything she ever did was bad. Then I'd change the subject. But the truth lingered, like the letters stacked in the shoebox under my bed. Sometimes I'd reread them in the middle of the night, sitting cross-legged on the floor, letting her words soak into the silence. They weren't apologies. But they were heavy. She once wrote, "Prison is loud in all the wrong ways, but it's quiet where it counts. No mirrors, just walls. You think about everything you ever edited about yourself." I edited too much. It hurt. Because buried beneath the betrayal, beneath the lawyer games and the lies and the smirks, was a woman I used to trust. Used to laugh with. Used to love. But love doesn't always survive damage. Sometimes it becomes something else. A scar, a story, a warning. After the 6th letter, I called my therapist and asked, do I owe her forgiveness? She replied, no, but you owe yourself peace. I asked, what if those are the same thing? She said, then let it come when you're ready, not before. So I kept the letters. Didn't reply. Didn't rip them up either. I told myself they weren't for me, they were for someday, for Jake. So that when he's old enough to ask for the full story, I can hand him the truth, not just the hurt. All of it. The paper trail of love and betrayal and something that tried to be remorse. Because maybe forgiveness doesn't live in what we say to the person who broke us. Maybe it lives in how we choose not to carry their mistakes as our own. One night, Jake came to me with a drawing. It was a picture of 3 stick figures, one big one, one small one, and a taller one with a red X across the body. I paused. He said, that's us and that's her. I asked, why the X? He shrugged, because she's not here, but I don't want to erase her. And that's when I knew. He was already learning what it took me years to understand. We don't have to erase people to survive them. We just don't walk back through the door they locked behind us. It started with a message request. I almost didn't see it, tucked between junk mail and spam on my account for the Bravery Room. The subject line just said, your story helped my family. I clicked without thinking. The message was from a man in Ohio, a journalist, he said, mid-30s. His sister had lost everything to their stepfather's fake investments. She never told anyone. He only found out after she passed away, a letter written years before describing the quiet shame she carried. I watched your interview, he wrote, the one where you talked about betrayal and silence and the price of being polite when you should have been angry. I think it's the first time I realized we weren't alone. I sat with that message for a while, then I read it again. And again. Because something had been happening quietly underneath everything else, something I hadn't fully named. The fundraiser went viral, yes. The story was picked up by blogs and podcasts and local networks, but that had always felt distant, like I was watching a version of myself perform grief for an audience. This was different. This was real. The man asked if he could fly to Denver, not for an exposé, not to dig through the past, but to talk human to human about what happens when the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who harm you most. I said yes. He arrived 2 weeks later. We met at the community center where the Bravery Room had just moved into its new space, a little 2-story building with sun-yellow walls and creaky wood floors. It used to be a dance studio. Now it held shelves of legal brochures, therapy worksheets, and coffee mugs that said things like, betrayal made me bolder. Jake was in the corner coloring while we talked. The journalist didn't ask for drama, he didn't fish for pain, he just asked, what made you fight back? I thought for a long time. Then said, because when someone steals from your child you either break or you build, and I chose to build. He nodded. The article published a week later, not a headline, a story. Bravery is a room you build yourself. It didn't focus on Lindsay, it focused on Jake, on the fundraiser, on the ripple effect of financial betrayal, on the way women are often told to keep quiet, keep peace, keep smiling, even while everything inside them is burning. The day it dropped, something cracked open. Emails poured in, not the viral kind, the real kind. One woman said her sister had drained their joint business account and blamed the bank. Another said her mother took out a credit card in her name and she'd been paying off that debt for 10 years. A man wrote that his wife's cousin had stolen from their autistic son's therapy fund and they'd buried it to avoid family drama. They all ended the same way. I thought I was alone. So we did something simple. We printed their stories, first names only, one per page, and hung them across the long wall in the Bravery Room's entryway. We called it the Ledger. Above it, in big, bold letters, "You're not the only ones." Visitors stopped to read them, some cried, some stayed for hours. Jake helped decorate the wall with string lights. "This one's my favorite," he said, pointing to a letter signed Survivor 14. It ended with, "She didn't steal my voice, just my money, and I got one of those back." I smiled, "That's a good one." Soon after, we hosted our first story night, a gathering of anyone willing to stand up and say, "This happened to me." No scripts, no filters, just truth. People came from as far as Idaho, New Mexico, even Canada. A woman with gray streaks in her braid told us how her twin sister had impersonated her for 5 years to drain their inheritance. A teen in a hoodie said her older brother stole her student loan login and took out $8,000 before ghosting her family. One man spoke through tears about his father forging documents and selling his name to a contractor for debt. We didn't interrupt. We didn't judge. We witnessed. At the end, someone asked if I would speak. I didn't have anything prepared, but I stood up, held the microphone, and said, "We were raised to believe silence keeps families safe. But silence only protects the ones doing the damage. So here's to speaking. And to every woman and man who chose to break the pattern instead of the mirror." That video was posted on YouTube. And then something I never expected happened. Jake's hospital, the one that once turned us away until we could pay, reached out. They offered a partnership. They wanted to work with the Bravery Room to launch a patient fund for families dealing with internal theft and betrayal-related financial trauma, not just to give money, but counseling, advocacy, legal aid. They named it after Jake. The Jake Whitman Courage Grant. I cried when I saw the letterhead. Not because I needed validation, but because the world, for once, wasn't pretending the pain didn't exist. One of the doctors said something I'll never forget. "The system can't undo what your sister did. But maybe this is the beginning of a different kind of justice." It wasn't revenge. It wasn't closure. But it was recognition. And recognition is its own kind of apology. The world didn't say "we're sorry" with flowers or headlines. It said it by listening, by changing policies, by creating a space where survivors weren't whispered about, they were celebrated. One afternoon, Jake tugged my sleeve while I was prepping for a workshop. "Hey, mommy." "Yeah, baby. I think you're famous now." I laughed. "Why that?" "Because lots of people come here to see you, but you still eat peanut butter sandwiches with me on the floor. That's what famous people should do." I dropped everything and hugged him so tight, he giggled. Fame wasn't what I wanted. All I ever wanted was for the world to understand that when someone steals from a mother trying to save her child, they don't just steal money. They try to steal hope. But I found a way to give that back to myself, to Jake, and to every woman who thought she had to stay silent. And maybe, just maybe, there's a photo I keep on my desk at the Bravery Room. It's tucked inside a simple wooden frame, a little worn at the corners. The image is from the fundraiser, the night everything changed. In it, Jake is sitting on my lap, grinning like he's just been told the world is his. His Batman blanket is slung over one shoulder, frosting on his cheek, and beside us is Lindsay. one arm around me, one hand raised in a toast. We're both smiling. But only one of us was telling the truth. I used to stare at that picture with anger, with confusion, with shame. How could I not have seen it? How could I have let her in that clothes, let her put her arm around us like she was part of the victory when she was already planning the theft? But time softens edges. Not in the way that makes you forget, no, the memory remains sharp. But it changes shape. Now when I look at that photo, I don't see betrayal. I see before. Before the collapse, before the silence, before I became someone who could survive it all. And that version of me, the one smiling beside her sister, she deserved to be seen too. I printed a copy and placed it in a sealed file under the name Personal Archive, not to be shredded. Because this story didn't start with revenge. It started with love. And love, even corrupted, leaves an imprint worth remembering. Jake's surgery was a year ago now. We celebrated the anniversary with cake and balloons and a walk in the park where he first rode his scooter again. He wanted to invite everyone from the bravery room, all the people who clapped for us, he said. So we did. 30 families, parents, kids, grandparents, survivors of betrayal who had walked through the same fire and come out glowing. We made a new mural on the community wall that day. The kids dipped their hands in paint and pressed them against the brick outside, bright reds and blues and yellows. At the top we wrote, "Proof we were here." Jake pressed his hand high above all the others. When I asked him why, he said, "Because I got taller." And it hit me how much we'd all grown. Later that night, after everyone left and the place fell quiet again, I sat on the floor of my office, back against the door, and finally opened the last letter from Lindsay. It had come 3 weeks earlier, but I hadn't touched it. I'd been busy, or maybe I just wasn't ready. But something about that night, the laughter, the murals, the way Jake danced in the grass with kids who once couldn't speak their own names, made me want to see what she'd written. Inside was a different kind of letter. Still handwritten. But this time it was addressed. Mallory. I've written versions of this 100 times. None of them sound right. But if this is the last one you ever open, I want you to have the real thing. I stole from you. I stole from Jake. I stole from every person who believed I was better than I was. And I didn't do it because I was desperate. I did it because I believed I could get away with it. I'm not asking you to forgive me. But I want you to know. Watching what you built, the Bravery Room, Jake's grant, that Instagram account that changed lives, it's the first time in my life I've felt the shame I deserve. You turned my failure into someone else's foundation. And that is the kind of woman I always pretended to be. You were never the weak one, Mal. I was. If Jake ever wants to see me one day, I'll sit across from him and answer every question, with honesty and nothing more. But if he doesn't, if that door stays closed, I'll understand. Tell him I was the crack in the glass. And he was the light that still came through anyway. I folded the letter carefully. I didn't cry. I didn't hate her. I didn't forgive her. I understood her. And maybe for some things that's all there ever is. Understanding. Not acceptance, not redemption. Just clarity. There's a phrase we use at the Bravery Room, printed on the last page of every intake form. Some doors are meant to stay closed, but you still have to build the house around them. That's what Lindsay is now. A door I no longer walk through, but a part of the house I built. And every time someone new walks through our center's front door, clutching a file folder or a trembling story they haven't said aloud in years, I see a version of myself in them. I see what silence once cost me. And I offer them something no one offered me back then. A seat, a hand, a way forward. One day I'll hand Jake the letters. Not now, not even soon, but when he's old enough, when his voice is strong enough to carry the weight of everything that was done in the shadows of his name. And I'll tell him the truth. That the world isn't made of good and bad. That sometimes the people who hold you in the photos are the same ones who disappear when the flash fades. And that survival isn't just what we do after we're hurt, it's what we build when we choose not to stay broken. He'll understand. He already does. Just last week, he asked if we could paint our living room blue. When I asked why, he said, because it feels like sky, and I want us to live in the sky now. I nodded, sky it is. And as I rolled that paintbrush across the wall, stroke by stroke, I realized. We weren't just surviving. We were living. Not in spite of the betrayal, but beyond it. Because there will always be people like Lindsay. But there will also always be women like me. And boys like Jake. And rooms full of hands on brick walls proving we were here. Proving we chose to rise. Proving we didn't walk back through the gate that broke us. Because we built a new one. One no one can take away. That was enough.